Hello to you. My name is Lance Beckford, and I'm glad to be able to share some of the things that have helped me become a professional drummer in this industry. Number one, I'm a music educator. I love to teach privately, teach in clinics, and teaching is where you get the foundation for so many things. But of course, I'm also a performer. So the things I teach, I also try and practice, and I keep learning as well. As far as my professional career, I was able to go to Musicians Institute and graduate in 2006. And I was able to get the award for Outstanding Student of the Year. And on top of that, I got to study with the best drummers in the world. The people I actually grew up watching as a kid, I studied with. Now we're friends and we're gigging together. Because of those contacts I made, they were able to help me get some beautiful work and great endorsements. And I get to work with companies like Yamaha, Paiste, Toca, Vic Firth, and Evans. And these companies are fantastic. I'm glad to have their support. They took a little guy like me and helped me achieve my dream. So in this DVD, we'll go over several concepts that I think are essential to helping you become not just a drummer, but a complete percussionist. So hopefully you can listen to what I have to say and you can take it and run with it and make it your own. Rudiments. That's really important for us to know as drummers. Just like a guitar player or a piano player or a saxophone player has scales, that's our equivalent of rudiments. There are 40 total rudiments, but the most important thing to know is to study each individual family of rudiments before you jump into all 40. So like I say, if you learn the father rudiment, the rest of the family will come in nice and smooth. I'm going to go through 5 rudiments that I use to warm myself up and give you a few exercises that you can take and make your own. If you ever get involved in a drumline situation, that'll give you great hands and working a lot of rudimental skills. So here's the first exercise that I do to warm myself up. This is called the sprinkler drill, and this is very creative. If you get a chance, go out to a field and listen to the sprinklers as they set themselves, and you'll hear this sound. So there's an exercise that we created in a drum line to help make this sound very, very unique. One thing it does on a snare drum, which I'm not going to actually play for you, but we play a double stop, which is where both sticks play at the exact same time. So here's how it sounds. Not a good sound, just so you know. Here's a double stop. That's not a flam. We'll get to flams later. So that sound on a snare drum isn't good, so I'll play it on a practice pad on the hard side so you can hear the exercise. So here's the sprinkler drill. So what this rudiment works is your single stroke roll. That's the focus of the first rudiment. Single stroke roll, really important. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Or if you're left-handed, or even if you're right-handed, play it left-hand lead as well. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. So I'll play just that rudiment on the snare drum so you know what that sounds like and feels like. It's really important to make sure you pulse in your mind eighth notes, because these are actually based on 30-second notes. For every eighth note, it's 4 strokes. So I'm going to actually play these for you straight and then give you the actual accent so you can understand how to feel these 30-second notes in a single stroke roll. Here's how they sound. In my head, I'm thinking 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. 4 strokes for every eighth note. I'm going to accent it so you can hear what I'm thinking. Take the accent away, and you want to feel that, in this case, in my right hand because I'm playing right hand lead. Single stroke roll again. Let's move on to the next rudiment, the double stroke roll. It'll sound a lot like your single stroke roll, and that's the goal. But the exercise that we use for this, especially in a drumline setting, which I'll reference a lot, is called chicken and a roll. And music and food always go together pretty well. So the exercise actually sounds like what I'm saying. chicken and a roll, 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 roll, stop. Here's how it sounds on the snare drum. So notice both double strokes in the right hand and left hand, right, right, left, left, are going to be even. You want to make sure they sound nice and even. If it's tough for you to play these double stroke rolls initially, here's one technique to help you. Play a rebound stroke and let the second stroke just bounce, like so. Left hand, same thing. Here's how that sounds just working on that technique. Not even, but it helps you relax. Once you understand how to control fingers, we use the fingers to snap up that second stroke. So the second stroke is actually a flick of the fingers after your initial rebound, like this. So your double stroke rolls will sound like a machine gun, ideally. Here's how it sounds just together, only the double stroke roll. Let's move on to the paradiddle family, one of the most beloved rudiments we have, used for many things. Paradiddles are actually a pair of diddles. So a pair would be like a right shoe and a left shoe. So it's right, left. Diddle is a code word for a double stroke. So in this case, right, right. So right, left, right, right. Then it goes to left hand lead, left, right, left, left. And you can just say paradiddle, 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 paradiddle. Usually these have accents, so I'll play them for you as they're normally interpreted. Now there's actually many variations of this sticking. I'm going to show you one more because there's an exercise I'm going to show you. So we just played right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. If we play that all backwards, start with the diddle, then do the pair, your sentence is really diddle pair, which would be right, right, left, right, and then left, left, right, left. Here's how that sounds. And what I'll do is I'll accent the and of every beat. 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, starting with the diddle. So that's reverse paradiddle, as I call it. It's the opposite sticking of a single paradiddle. So these can be used to replace single strokes. If you're going to play, for example, a song called Wipeout, it has a very classic drum solo. You can replace those single stroke rolls with paradiddles. The first measure is a good example. I'll just play you the first measure as singles, then do it again as paradiddles. Here's the first measure of Wipeout. Again. Same thing with paradiddles. Same sticking, same sound hopefully, but now using paradiddles. Again. So you can really take these and manipulate what strokes you're going to play within singles and doubles. So here's an exercise I created based on something I learned in high school. It's called the morph. And I'll explain it to you and I'll play it so you can hear it and see it. We're going to take single strokes and then double strokes. With me so far? Okay. How do we get from singles to doubles? Well, we have to do half singles and half doubles, which is what you just learned, a paradiddle. Right, left, right, right. So we're going to play single stroke roll into paradiddles, into a double stroke roll, and then to get out of a double stroke roll back into singles, we're going to play half doubles and half singles, which is the reverse paradiddle I just showed you. The reverse paradiddle will lead us back into singles again. So the order is single stroke roll, single paradiddle, double stroke roll, reverse paradiddle, and that gets you all the way back to the beginning. No accents. So this is tougher because you have to play everything all one height. Here's an example of how that sounds. I'll start slow and just gradually speed up. Here we go. The morph. So you saw I was changing stickings, but hopefully that sound was consistent of all those 30-second notes in this case. So paradiddles are great because they're half singles and half doubles. So challenge yourself to work on them in many ways. 2 more rudiments to go. Next one is the flam. In the beginning I mentioned a double stop. A double stop is when both sticks hit at the exact same time. Not good on a snare drum or a tom even because it cancels out the sound. So here's a double stop. Weak sounding. A flam is actually 1 motion, 2 sounds. Okay? So what's going to happen is you're going to have what we call a grace note, which is going to be a low height, and then a high accent, which is going to be your accented note. So if you were to guess, which stick would drop first if I drop both of these at the same time? This one. So here's how it will sound. Again. That's a right flam because the right hand was the accent. Left flam is just the opposite. So right stick low, left hand high. The right stick will hit first. Here's how it sounds. Again. So playing hand-to-hand flams actually makes it look like you're playing singles. So I'm going to play you hand-to-hand flams, which means I'll go right flam, left flam, right flam, left flam. But my low note or grace note will always stay low. So here's what hand-to-hand flams look like. Flams are also a great study on accents. If I separate my hands, I'll put my left hand on my left leg. Listen to the right hand. You're going to hear accent tap, accent tap. So you can see this is already loaded with a lot of stuff. So what's a fun exercise we can play with flams? How about the Mexican hat dance? Da 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 da, ba da 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 da. Da 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 da, ba da 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 da. Yes, it's going to be done with flams. So every stroke is a flam. This has more of a triplet-based feel. So I'm going to play it for you. Hopefully I nail it because this is fun. But hand-to-hand flams at quick speeds are a little bit difficult. So here's what the Mexican hat dance would sound like with flams. So that's the first half of the Mexican hat dance. There's a second half that's a lot of straight up hand-to-hand flams. So here's the second half of the Mexican hat dance. Da 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 ba da da ba da ba da ba da 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 ba da 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 da. So I'll try and play that on the snare drum with flams again. So it's a challenge, but why not work on hand-to-hand flams? It's a lot of fun. So Mexican hat dance for your flams. The last rudiment, which is another very important rudiment, is what I call the multiple bounce family, or the buzz roll, if you're familiar with that. So how do you gain control of playing buzz strokes? First of all, we have to allow the stick to bounce as freely as possible, but not be audible. We don't want to hear any strokes, just hear a sound, a wall of sound. So work on individual buzz strokes. And when you watch me play this, I actually learned this from studying concert percussion. I'm going to create almost like a little letter V as I play these strokes. So I'm starting outside and then bringing myself towards the center. And don't play in the center of the head because there's not as much rebound there. Play off center, more between halfway between the rim and the actual center of the drum. So here's what those strokes sound like individually on buzz strokes. That's what a buzz roll or multiple bounce roll sounds like. Notice I'm not digging into the drum head. I'm not going like this. But I'm also not letting the stick flop either. It's one motion and a buzz of sounds. So important to work on that with each hand and then work on pulsing. So here's a key to getting yourself in control of buzz strokes. I create an exercise that's based on numbers and patterns, but I'll just play it for you. You can hear the melody. But your hand speed never changes. So if you're playing 16th notes, you just buzz each 16th note stroke. If you're playing triplets, you just buzz each triplet stroke. So take a listen to this exercise and watch my hands. They always move the same speed. I just add the buzz strokes. My hands were always doing this, but I just added the buzz strokes as I needed to. Just, if you're curious, I was playing half notes, then a half note roll. Dotted quarter note roll. Quarter notes, quarter note roll. Eighth notes, eighth note roll. And then right hand, and then buzz. That, zat, 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 zat. So I'm going down as far as note value and then bringing it back up. But it just helps you really understand how to pulse your buzz strokes. So work on that. Make sure one hand can play a good solid buzz stroke and then put them together. Don't try and play as fast as you can. It's actually better to play a little bit slower and allow each stick to move in that. These rudiments are excellent and they're going to help develop your playing. Later on in this DVD, you'll see a section called cadence grooves, and you'll apply some of these rudiments to those very grooves on drum set. And there's several ways you can be creative with these rudiments. Don't just play them on a snare drum or a pad. Put some kind of pattern on your feet, an ostinato, repetitive pattern, and play these ideas. But hopefully the exercises help you and you have fun. Enjoy these rudiments. There are several drum set grooves for us to learn. So it's important for me, I think, to name them or have a category for them. So I'm going to go through a few different drum set grooves that I think are really essential and give them some kind of identity. So these grooves are going to be very important because you have to actually use your creativity. So let's jump into those right now. The first groove we're going to go through is a concept called 3 plus 3 plus 2. What this is a breakdown of is taking 4/4 time, and there are 8 eighth notes in a measure of 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Replace the numbers with 2 groups of 3 and 1 group of 2, and you get 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So primarily the snare drum will be on the 1s and the kick will fill in the 2s and 3s or just the 2. So here's how the first 3 plus 3 plus 2 concepts sound. This groove is also considered the Coldplay groove, so you're going to recognize it from that, from the song Clocks. Moving on, we're going to take that snare drum and move it over. So on the 3 side, it'll be on the 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. On the 2 side, it'll still be on the 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Here's how that sounds. Another variation is taking the snare drum and moving it to the 3rd eighth note of the 3s. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Here's how that sounds. The last groove I'll play for you is taking the first groove I played, which is 3 plus 3 plus 2, and just taking the whole thing and flipping it around. So the kick drum will start first, and the snare will answer. Kick, kick, snare, kick, kick, snare, kick, snare. So it's the whole groove in reverse. So this is the fourth variation of 3 plus 3 plus 2. Here's how that sounds. So lastly, these are three numbers we're dealing with, 3 plus 3 plus 2. So you can easily take those numbers and move them around. So maybe you want to think of going 3 plus 2 plus 3. Let's try that, 3 plus 2 plus 3. And then, of course, take the entire example and play it backwards. So 2 plus 3 plus 3. Make sure you count so you know where beat 1 is, but I'll highlight that on the crash cymbal. So 2 plus 3 plus 3. So take those ideas from 3 plus 3 plus 2 and think of all the possibilities you can to be a creative drummer in this approach. Cadence grooves. This is something I'm very excited about because I grew up playing in drumline, and so it's nice to be able to put it on a drum set. But it's that militaristic marching snare drum sound that you hear in many songs. So in the first chapter we talked about rudiments and how you can apply them to cadence grooves. Here's your chance to do that. So we'll play mostly continuous 16th notes on the snare drum with a couple different kick drum patterns, and we'll add accents to create a rhythmic melody. So the first pattern, we're going to accent beat 2 and beat 4. Kick drum wise, we can play two patterns. Kick on beat 1 and beat 3, and then also 4 on the floor, which is a kick on every single beat. So here is the first groove with both kick drum patterns. So you should notice the second half of that groove had more drive to it. So 4 on the floor always drives a point home. So you can make the decision yourself as to how you want the groove to feel. The second groove I'm going to do is when we add a snare addition. So in this case, I'm going to add the of 2, and again give you the same kick drum variation. So beat 1 and beat 3, then 4 on the floor. So this is the of 2 being added to beat 2 and 4. The third groove I'm going to do for you is going to incorporate an accent on the E of 3. So again, 2 and 4 will stay on the snare drum, but the E of 3 will be added. So here are both kick drum patterns with that. The last pattern I'll play for you before adding some of the rudimental characteristics is a lot more syncopated, so the beat itself is not emphasized, but all the off beats. So this pattern is going to not play beat 2, but we're going to play the of 1, the and of 2, and then beat 4. So there's more space within it. So take a listen to this groove here. that one you've probably heard before. It's been used a lot, but there's a lot of motion involved, especially adding 4 on the floor. So what can you do to add the rudimental variety or variations I was telling you about? Basically, here's my approach. 2 and 4, I'll keep it just as a single snare drum hit. Anything that's off the beat, like an E of 3 or the of 2, I'll make a flam out of that. So let's take the variation, which is groove 3, which we put the snare on the E of 3. I'll put a flam on the E of 3 just to fatten that up. So here's how that would sound. Just a little variation, but the flam just brings that extra accent out. We can also, especially in this groove, add rolls. So 5-stroke rolls or 9-stroke rolls, but it almost creates release because a lot of these militaristic grooves, just playing constant 16th notes, they build up a lot of tension. So the roll can add a release. So I'll play the last groove, which is groove 4, and I'll incorporate flams as well as rolls so you can hear how it evolves. I'll start out just playing it with accents only and then evolve into the actual rudimental spice with the pattern. So as you can see, you can decorate this groove with many rudiments. So find out what makes the most sense. Don't clutter it, but make sure it feels like it's fun to play, but it makes sense for the song you're playing. Enjoy these cadence grooves. Tom grooves. A student of mine actually asked me, Lance, are there any books or DVDs on specific tom grooves? And initially I said, I don't think so. And I looked into it, and there's no books on how to develop tom grooves. And there's always substitutions, but it doesn't go into detail. So because of that conversation with that student, we now have a chance to work on this concept together. So I'm going to break down developing tom grooves and things that will help you. So let's jump into that. The first concept we're going to talk about is what I call snare additions. So in a standard groove, your snare drum will play on 2 and 4, which are called the backbeats. Anytime you play something besides 2 or 4, I call it an addition. So 1 and 2, and the and of 2 is an addition, or 1, 2, 3, E and 4. The E of 3 is an addition. So what I usually try to do is I'll play 2 and 4 on the snare, and then the addition gets placed on a tom. And your riding hand, the hand that leads the subdivision, in this case will play on the floor tom. So here's a couple of examples of what a snare addition tom groove would be. So as you can see, I'm giving you the idea of the standard drum set groove and then taking it to the toms. Here's another groove that you would just take again and move to the toms. This is like a classic rock and funk groove pattern. So that is what I call snare addition concepts. The next concept is 2 ideas put together. The first one is continuous 16th notes, where you're continuously playing 16th notes on the toms, providing accents, and also doing a linear pattern, which we'll talk about that meaning in just a minute. So the continuous 16th note grooves is definitely something that gives you a lot of motion. As far as the feet go, it's up to you if you want to add your hi-hat. Sometimes the hi-hat adds that higher element where it's not so dry. And if you want to add that, great. If not, you can leave it out. But it definitely gives you an extra thickness to your groove. Here is an example of a continuous 16th note tom groove. So you notice my hands again were playing the entire time, hence the continuous 16th notes. So if you don't want to have your hands playing the entire time, you can get some really cool rhythms between your toms and your kick drum. So I won't play continuous 16th notes, but I'll stop playing my hands, and the kick drum will take away the hand stroke that I would play normally. So this is called a hand-foot combination. So here's what a syncopated or linear tom groove would sound like. No two limbs hit at the same time. It's always independent limbs. So on that, you notice I was able to play flams on the snare to open it up and fatten it up some more, but the kick and the toms were trading ideas. My left hand was taken away by the kick, and my right hand was taken away by the kick, vice versa. So those are linear and syncopated drum grooves as well as continuous tom patterns. Fusing genres. Earlier I mentioned genres are rock, jazz, Latin. So it's a big category with many things underneath them. So with tom grooves, there's a lot of really cool things you can do. If you listen to other styles of music or other genres of music, you're going to notice that there's some very interesting rhythms. So two styles I want to point out to you specifically in genres would be Latin music, specifically Afro-Cuban, and then also more of a Middle Eastern vibe. The first groove is based on a pattern called wah-wah-ko. This is played on congas, and the pattern sounds like this on just the toms. So to make this wah-wah-ko more of a pop, commercial-based idea, we can add a backbeat, kick drum, and some hi-hat to it. So here's how that would sound. Again, also we can use some creative sticking from the rudiment patterns to fill out this wah-wah-ko pattern in a pop setting. Here's how that would sound. So the pattern's still there, the melody's there, but we just embellished it and added some more things to make it really come to life. So tom grooves can be extremely creative, but studying other genres will make you understand that better. One more groove I'll do for you actually came from a recording session I did. It was a group that was actually recording Disney songs, but doing new arrangements. And really I tapped into more of a Middle Eastern kind of a vibe. There's some roots to, of course, African music in this, but it's mainly a Middle Eastern song. So I'm going to play some splashy hi-hats for you to give it that little finger cymbal effect, and just listen to the melody you get from this pattern. And I'll turn the snares off too so you can really hear just what the toms are saying. If I didn't have those hi-hats in there, it wouldn't be the same groove. It just gives it that real light feel. So listen to other genres, other styles of music. Get out of just America and go other places, and you can use that to make your tom grooves come alive. Oh, the hi-hat foot. Sometimes the most abandoned limb of our four limbs, but it's also called the anchor. It's really important if you're not using this foot to really get it into shape. You're missing out on so many great groove enhancers that if you don't use this foot, you're going to miss out on. So, playing your hi-hat foot on its own will lead you to playing double bass drum, and you know you want to do that. Let's whip that foot into shape. that's what a hi-hat foot can add to your groove. I've seen many great drummers do that, and I learned it, and it's been so influential to me. So here's how we'll get started with playing basic hi-hat left foot independence. If you're a left-handed drummer, then of course it'll be your right foot. There are 4 basic patterns we're going to concentrate on. Pattern number 1 will deal with the left side of our body being in sync. So the hi-hat will play on beat 2 and beat 4. You want to be able to play this groove with any groove you're playing on the kit. So I'll use a ride cymbal, just a basic kick and snare, beat 1 and beat 3 on the kick, 2 and 4 on the snare. Here's your first hi-hat pattern. So notice the hi-hat plays with the snare drum, so the left side is in sync. This is going to develop your jazz playing and Latin drumming playing much later on. The next important pattern is playing the pulse, which is the quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's add that to this groove. Now we get to my favorite hi-hat groove, which is playing just the ands of the beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This has the most funky R&B sound to it, but it's a really good exercise. So here's what that sounds like. This has that extra, that thing to it. And the last groove is going to be eighth notes, which will actually double what the ride cymbal is playing. So this will thicken up the groove. So eighth notes on the hi-hat, eighth notes on the ride cymbal. Here's how that sounds. If you can play any of those 4 hi-hat patterns with any groove you can play, it's going to enhance your balance, number 1, and also prepare you again for that double bass workout we're going to get to. But there's also some other techniques I want to show you on your hi-hat, besides just playing these specific rhythms. Later on, we're going to talk about playing hand percussion and adding a hi-hat to your setup. This is why it's important to start now. So some other techniques you'll use will be something called a splash. Here's how that looks on your hi-hat foot. It simulates playing an open hi-hat. Then you can also use a tap splash, which is a lighter sound. And of course, you can actually implement these in different grooves. So maybe you want to play a disco groove. I'll play you a disco groove on the hi-hat, then I'll take my hand away and my left foot will continue playing the pattern. So here's how that would sound. So it frees your hands up to do more things. That left foot is really independent. So use these strokes and make sure they're going to be to your advantage. Fill concepts. 2 different approaches to this misunderstood idea. Concept number 1, drum fill. Okay, I'll throw in as much as I possibly can to wow the audience. Or concept number 2, drum fill. What do I do? Those are 2 ideas that you can possibly be considering if you see a chart or just know you have to play a drum fill. Simplest idea, a drum fill is just a transition from one section of a song to the next. It's like using a comma or a period at the end of a sentence. So don't try to wow the audience with everything you play, and don't be scared. It's something that can transition you from one section to the next. So I'm going to give you a few concepts that you can take and use as your fill approach. So a private drum teacher I had told me, don't think like a drummer. Think like a musician. That's the first concept of our fills. Take simple rhythms, play them on the snare drum, and as you get more comfortable with that, you can move it around. So right now I'm going to play your rhythm, just make it up based on reading so many books. I'll just play one measure of 4/4 time on the snare and use that as a drum fill. This is concept number one. Think like a musician, not a drummer. Here's a rhythm. Let's take that rhythm, I'll play it within a groove and start to orchestrate the fill. One rhythm, and then as you get more comfortable, you orchestrate it. So you can just take a book that you're reading out of, a rhythm book, and just say, I'll pick that measure and make it my drum fill, and just come up with ways to make it sound good, and you'll start to add more in between. Now there's another concept I really enjoy, and it's a hand and foot combination pattern, meaning that your hands will play a rhythm, but your foot will also fill in the missing gaps. There's 4 primary rhythms. I want to go through them quickly just so you have an idea of what they are. So pattern number 1 is this rhythm on your snare drum. That's counted as 1 EN, 2 EN, 3 EN, 4 EN. So we're missing the last 16th note, which is the foot. So we're going to plug the foot in between to play the So this is how it sounds when you combine the two together. So what happens is usually on 16th notes, we're playing 1 E and right, left, right, left. That left hand is now being played by the kick drum. So here's a couple examples of how that fill would sound. Same concept, but of course you can move that around and orchestrate it. So the next rhythm that you can use can be just the opposite. Rather than 1 E and, let's think 1 and. We're missing the E, so the foot will take the place of the E. Here's how that rhythm sounds with the kick drum. So the kick is on the E, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. Here's a fill within a groove. Okay, there's 2 more. Let's go through the next 2. We're going to put the snare drum on the E and of each beat. So that leaves beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4 open. This one's a little bit tricky. Let me play on the snare drum first. That's the E and E and So we're missing the beat. When we put the actual pulse in the kick drum, it'll be more complete. Here's how that sounds together. So now you have more of a complete idea. Here's how that sounds within a groove. The last pattern is the herky-jerky pattern, which is 1 E, So the and is missing on the kick drum. So here's how the rhythm on the snare drum would sound without the kick drum. 1 E, a 2 E, a 3 E, a 4 E. Add the kick on the ands, you complete the hand and foot combination. In a groove. That's just one of the concepts. And concepts are great because if I give you a concept, there's a bunch of different branches you can add on your own. If I just give you one idea, that's all you're left with. So there's many ways you can take these fills and move them around. There's also the concept of playing 2 on the hands and 2 on the feet. This is also good for double bass playing later, but making sure you get your hands and feet to sound as strong as possible. 2 on the hands, 2 on the feet, and you can move those kick drums around to make these sound excellent. The last thing I want to talk about for you is something I enjoyed doing when I was in music school. We actually had a class called Fill Fest, and our teacher actually challenged us to create our own drum fill and name it. So the one that I created is called the Raccoon, and it actually sounds the way it's played. So I'll break it down for you, then I'll play it within the context. Snare drum is first, that'll be the rack. So here's your rack. And then the tom in front of you, whether it's your first tom or second tom, just the first tom, is your coon. It speaks to you, so raccoon. Then I thought to myself, well, how about raccoon, raccoon, rat? That's a rudiment, that's called a rough. So I'll put a small drag or rough before the first rack, and you get this sound. Raccoon. So to give it some more life, I just added some more 16th notes in between, and here's a fill I came up with called the Raccoon. And of course, as you get more comfortable, you'll gain more and more of your own experience with that. So come up with a fill, name it, and see how many ways you can make it your own. If you're into drums just because of the way it looks, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong business. Once you set up a drum set the correct way, you will then have your look. Just because a drum set is set up in a magazine at all flat angles or horizontal angles, it's just for the sake of demonstrating what the kit looks like. But for you and for drummers you see, there's reasons why we set them up certain ways. So I want to start with the cymbal first. Cymbals come in many shapes and many sizes and thicknesses. So choose the right tool for the job. If you're playing really hard, you want a bigger gauge cymbal like an 18-inch, 19-inch and above, and a thicker textured cymbal. And if you're playing lighter or in smaller rooms, maybe a smaller crash with a thinner gauge. But if you have a crash cymbal set up at a very high level and flat, and you want to hit that cymbal, you're going to crack it, no matter how thick it is. I've seen them, and you've probably seen them. But you do not want to hit a cymbal on its edge, because you're going to crack it. That's the most sensitive part. The bow, which is where the cymbal begins to taper down, that's the ideal hitting spot for a cymbal. So if you have it high, it's okay, but just make sure you have it tilted a little bit, like you see on mine. It's got a little forward tilt toward me. If you play your cymbals low, like I usually do, then yes, you'll have to bring it up a little bit so you're not hitting and bending your wrist a certain way, but still hitting the bow where the edge and the top of the cymbal meet. Moving to the hi-hats. Great instrument and sometimes underused and misused. So on the hi-hats, if you look, when I have them open, you can tell that one side is closer than the other. That's intentional. If you listen to the sound I get, it's a nice pronounced chick. Really clear. There's a mechanism on the bottom that most people don't use, or some people just don't really care about, but it really affects your sound. It's called a tilter. So if I tilt this to where the cymbals are completely flat, you're going to get this whiff sound, not clear. There's no energy behind it. So use that tilter and offset your cymbals so you can get that nice pronounced chick. It's really important to use that. You can also set your tilter on the side closest to you or on the opposite side, and that'll give you a little bit more of a tilt if you want a tilt in your hi-hats. But because there's two cymbals, they're supported so the edges won't crack quite as easily, but you'll use the edge for accents and the top for non-accents. On the ride cymbal, depending on the kind of setup that you use, and you notice mine's in an interesting spot, but I'll talk about why in just a minute. Your ride cymbal, most of the time you're going to be hitting the ride cymbal on the bow, which is the sweet spot is halfway between the edge and the bell. So anywhere in that middle zone is a sweet spot for your ping or your articulation. But make sure it's set up at an angle to where you can easily get to it and not have to worry about going way up high or contorting your arm. Most times, as far as grip is concerned, when your ride cymbal's set up, you're going to move your stick and pivot, and you're going to end up in French grip, which allows you to relax your arm a lot more. So make sure the ride's easy to get to, and also when hitting a bell, typically you're going to use the shoulder of the drumstick midway up the bell to get a fat sound. But of course, you can experiment. You can use the tip for a lot less belly sounds. So, like I say for drums, it's a game of inches and angles. You move a drum or a cymbal 1 inch, you move it this way or that way, the ball game's completely different. As far as drums are concerned, with your toms, they're a little bit different than your snare drums. So your toms, again, you don't want them to be completely flat, because if you have these flat, you have to really work at getting over the rim and then hitting the drum. And most of the time, you're hitting in the center of a tom, not a rim shot, like we would on snare drum later on. So make sure your toms are at a comfortable level as far as height, but make sure there's an angle to where you can hit them right in the center every time. The floor tom can have a unique feel if it's a floor tom, truly, or if it's a racked floor tom, because you can suspend the angles, move the legs. But again, you probably want to get right in the center of that drum. If you play it flat, you might end up catching the rim more than you want to. So give yourself an angle and make sure it feels comfortable. The snare drum is something that you can set up flat or even inverted where it's facing away from you, because we tend to hit rim shots on a drum set snare drum. And so a rim shot, of course, you know, is where you catch the rim and the head at the same time to give you a higher bark or higher attack of a sound. As far as tilting away, that just gives you the more natural angle of where your stick is. That's actually an orchestral technique, but you don't have to worry about that if you don't need to. But your snare drum can be set either flat or a little bit towards you. But if you want to catch a rim shot, make sure it's easy and sit there and practice playing a rim shot. Like I said, this is a game of inches and angles. So with your throne, as far as where you're sitting, the height is a big deal. If you're tall, you might like to sit low. If you're short, you might like to sit high. That's really important. Wherever your throne is, as far as your hips and your knees are concerned, that's going to affect where everything is. Typically, it's been said in many magazines from doctors, if you sit with your hips above your knees, it's a lot better for your back. If you're sitting with your hips below your knees, you're putting more strain on your back. So consider at least sitting at 90 degrees or a little above that, like 80 degrees or 75. But your throne height and placement will also affect the way you play your drums. Once you get your drums set up and comfortable for the way you like it from here, then you can get up and walk around to the front and look at it and say, yeah, that's my look. Double bass drum. This is a fun time to talk about something that a lot of people love, and I love it as well. Glad I got to study it and use it. I don't use it all the time, but it's just good to have. Talking about the setup, double bass drum pedals will definitely affect your setup. Even if you play 2 bass drums, that's a whole different setup. But one thing I do for myself is this. Where my hi-hat usually is, if I don't have a double pedal, I'll take my foot and I'll split it in half. So I'll put half of one pedal on one side and half of the other pedal on the other side. That way my foot is still centralized and I'm not completely awkward when I'm playing. So make sure you really get a chance to work on your balance and put the pedals exactly where you want to. One of the best ways to get used to playing double bass is by mimicking any groove you can play with your right foot in your left foot. So if it's 4 on the floor or a rock groove or an R&B groove, use that. So let me just play you a quick example of alternating right foot and left foot within a groove. So I just traded the idea. I played 2 measures of time with the right foot, 2 measures of time with the left foot. That's one of the first and easiest ways you can get used to playing. There are a lot of exercises I like to use, especially being a drumline teacher as well as a student of drumline. And so mirroring what you do on one foot and the other. So I'm going to play a series of exercises that highlight just the right foot and just the left foot. And we're also going to cover how the hi-hat foot can be used for a couple of tricks. The first pattern will deal with numbers. 8, 4, and 2. What we're going to do is we're going to play the right foot downbeat eighth notes, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The left foot will play the E's and the U's, the in-betweens. 1 E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E, We'll play those back to back, and then we'll also get into actually playing alternating single strokes on the kick drum. I'll do it within a groove so you can hear the context, and then we'll try and pull it away just on its own. So here's how that exercise would sound. So all that led to playing that, which is a sound people love. It's important to isolate the feet and make sure you know what's going on and see if they sound good in time. It's sometimes easier to play everything together and hard to isolate them. So I'm going to risk something right now and play just my feet, and we'll see how clean they are. With this exercise, you can play the same pattern twice or 4 times, but the longer you play it, the bigger endurance you're going to gain. So here's that same pattern with just the feet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tough to isolate, and I'm trying to keep my hands down for the sake of I can have them here or hold myself up, but that's not going to happen. So just relaxing and focusing on the feet. Investigate what's going on down there first. Those are just a couple basic patterns to get you grooving, but the coordination is important to know. So here's another thing we can go into. Several drummers have showed me this, and it's great to see, and hopefully you can take it and work with it. Before in our hi-hat chapter, we talked about getting that left foot, or if you're a left-handed drummer, that right foot, really established because it leads to double bass. Well, as a right-handed drummer, this is something interesting. We talked about playing your hi-hat on the eighth notes, on the beats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Well, if you apply that to the double bass drum, that would be now you're playing left foot lead as a right-handed drummer. And actually for me, it is more comfortable, but I force myself to play right foot lead just for consistency's sake. So here's what I'm talking about. We can play eighth notes on the hi-hat and then cross-step the kick drum pedal with the hi-hat pedal, which looks like this. So I'm playing both pedals at the same time. Here's a couple examples of how that looks and sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to keep the eighth notes going, you can cross-step the pedals. But for this example, I'm going to go from the hi-hat to the bass pedal, but I'm playing left foot lead while playing my groove. And to me, it feels better because it makes sense, because the left foot's used to playing on the beat. So here's the example I'm going to give you. So that was left, right on my feet versus playing right, left. So try that out too, because it makes sense. You've been working on developing this foot on the beat. So if you're working it off the beat, it won't be quite the same for you, but hey, you have the option of choosing. So don't be afraid of double bass. It'll give you a lot of success, a lot of fun, but it'll definitely challenge you. Have fun. If an artist happened to paint with just one brush, could they make something beautiful? Yes. But if they only knew how to use one brush, they're missing the entire spectrum of possibility and creativity. So of course, a great artist has many brushes and many textures to make something beautiful. For us as drummers, it's the same concept. You don't just use wooden drumsticks. There are several implements that you can use to enhance your playing. And by playing other genres, this will give you more of an idea. But I want to make sure I give you a chance to know what it's like to play with other implements and how to use them on the drum set. First implement, wire brushes. Just so you know, I tend to play these in traditional grip. You can play them traditional or match, but this is just the way I learn, and it makes the most sense, and there's a lot you can do with that. Wire brushes have a lot of great effects. You can, of course, take them in or push them back out. But mainly, I want to work on the snare drum because that's where most of the work is done. I actually had to play a track where I just played a swirl pattern for the entire track. and it was 2 hands using concentric circles. And so I want to show you just a real basic approach to doing this. So we want to use very light brush pressure. Don't put the entire weight of the brush on the head, but just the tips of the brushes. And you want to try and make a smooth circle and use some arm weight. And every time you change direction, you get a little bit of a rhythm. And I'm going to pulse a half note for you. So 2 beats long, you're going to hear this swirling pulse. So here's something I had to play on a song once. So that little flicker I'm getting is just moving my fingers in a little bit. If you study jazz, you will learn this stuff. That's why it's important to study other genres. Don't be a one-track drummer. Be as many drummers as you can possibly be. But using these for any contemporary grooves is great as well. So I'm going to play you a groove and just show you the delicacy of brushes and some very nice sounds you can get. I'll use some rim shots and I'll just use some rudimental ideas, but just using this as a nice texture. So here's one groove example for you. You can have a lot of fun with wire brushes, but be creative, but also take the time to learn how to use them effectively. I'm going to switch to a different implement now. And what we call these are roots. These are from Vic Firth, called Root 505s. These are used for a lot of train grooves, which is used in country western music or even in folk music. And I'm actually going to put a piece of moon gel on this snare drum. I took this piece off here for the brushes so they didn't get in the way. By the way, moon gel, used for drumming. Tape is used for plumbing. So please, use the stuff that people make that actually make the drums sing, okay? So, with these roots, you can actually adjust how much tension you want. So if you want a tight, thicker sound, you can roll this band up. If you want a medium, a little bit more floppy sound, you can put it halfway. And then a lot more flop, you can put it further down. So I'll put it about halfway or so. With this, I'll play on the snare drum, but it's interesting to note as I move to different drums, if I play everything in the center, this is the sound you're going to get with just these roots. So it's delicate. If I put a rim shot on everything, here's the sound you get. So you can use a rim shot to get fuller sounds, or you can play in the center to get delicate sounds. On cymbals, like a ride cymbal particularly, you don't get much definition. So even if you roll this up, you don't get much definition out of a cymbal. So not the first choice for cymbals, but you can use it. On a hi-hat, it'll work more effectively. So you can use these in several ways, but no, you can probably use rim shots for full sounds, and then center shots for different sounds. But here's an example of a train country groove. They give you different sounds, different colors. Again, that artist, that paintbrush. The next mallet I want to use is bundle wrapped sticks. These are actually called Root 606s. And there's many versions of these. You've all seen them, but from Vic Firth, they make a Root 606. This is pretty strong. It can emulate a stick, but it's not the exact same loudness. So again, you can play in the center of the drums, and this is the sound you get, more of a crunchy sound. Or you can play rim shots and everything to get a fuller sound, but not as much heaviness as a stick. Also, a key point to know, with this chapter that we're on, I actually turned my bass drum beater around to use the felt side, because that way the sound is a lot more consistent and not that really thick plastic beater that's so loud. So also consider your bass drum beater being uniform with what you're playing in your hands. These are great to use if you're playing in a coffee shop or a small setting. But again, you can still play any groove you want. Just know that you want to practice with these. It's harder to play certain rudiments with these because they have angles versus being a round stick. So it's good to have as many pairs of sticks as possible, practice with them, and please do use them. Going away from these for a second, talking about sticks. Sticks have many different shapes and sizes. Nylon tip, for example. Nylon tip sticks are great because they don't chip off. The heads don't chip off. But the sound is different, especially on a ride cymbal or on the toms or on your snare drum. It's going to be a lot more defined, a lot more clear. The wood tip sticks, the downside of those is they tend to chip away, which is annoying. You have to buy a new pair of sticks just because the bead chipped. But there's several different dimensions. There's arrowhead tips, there's round tips, there's barrel tips, acorn tips. The sharper the tip, the more clarity you get on a cymbal. The rounder and fuller a tip, the fatter sound you get on a cymbal or a tom, any drum in particular. So really consider what style of music you're playing and pick the right stick for that job. Experiment, but make sure you pick what's important. Last stick I'm going to deal with, which is mallets here. These are actually orchestral mallets, Becken, which is the German word for cymbal. I'm going to show you some cymbal rolls and some concepts that you might not know or some people just get misunderstood about. I'm actually going to remove this wing nut because we don't want any extra sound while we're playing. So it's probably a good idea to actually remove wing nuts and felts to give the cymbal the most clarity and most vibration. As for cymbal rolls, it's really important to know that you don't need to play as fast as you can to make a cymbal create this swell. A teacher of mine actually told me, imagine just riding the wave. So get the cymbal to move to where it's going to be able to stay horizontal and allow it to swell itself and resonate. So you don't want to have your mallets so close together because the cymbal is not allowed to resonate at that point. So we want to pull the mallet heads further away towards the edge of the cymbals, start soft and crescendo by just increasing height, but you don't need to play very fast. So here's an example of a cymbal roll or cymbal swell. I'll prep the cymbal just to let it start resonating and then start the roll. One more time, and if you look at the mallet speed, it's not going that fast. So cymbal rolls are very effective. Make sure, again, go out and get the right mallets, get the right tool for the job for your cymbals. Timpani mallets can be used, but they're meant for timpani. Get some good mallets and work on controlling and riding that wave of the cymbal. Learning drum parts. That's a really important skill. Let's say you're watching one of your friends perform, he's a drummer or she's a drummer, and they're playing a cover. They said they're playing a cover of a song, which means they're going to play it right along with the actual track, the way it was done. And everyone happens to know that one fill and that groove. And they start playing the song and you're like, that's not the groove at all. Okay, here comes that fill. Maybe they'll get that fill. What was that? So sometimes you have that approach, and sometimes you have the person that actually plays the song correctly. So if you're going to cover a song, you're going to play it as it was recorded, note for note. If you're doing an arrangement of a song, arrangement of a cover, then you have the freedom to change it up. So one of the biggest things I'm trying to get at for you is understanding how to learn and listen to the drum parts authentically. That's the most important skill in making a song come to life and be memorable. Let's say you're a vocalist. You have to learn the melody and the lyrics. You can't just show up and sing whatever you want. So why would you as a drummer just say, oh, I'll play whatever I want there? No, don't fall in that trap. Get some great headphones and actively listen, meaning you're going to listen to what the kick drum is doing, what the snare drum is doing, the hi-hat pattern, the fills. Now fills can be relative. Sometimes it's not always something you can play because it's not the emotion you had. But if it's a significant fill or a theme fill, make sure you learn it. And also learn the bass part, learn the guitar part. Learn the vocal melody, sing along, because you're going to be able to hear and encompass all of the details that make that song unique. So really take time in understanding how to learn drum parts. One of the best things you can do for yourself in this process is learning how to write music notation. One teacher actually told me this, which is, you're fluent in a language. So being fluent means you can speak, read, and write. Well, guess what? Music is a language. So you can speak music by counting rhythms. You can read music by reading rhythms, and you can also write music. So by you learning how to transcribe or write drum notation, it'll help you understand how detailed the part is, and you can read what you're writing. It makes just a lot of sense. So really make sure if you're going to learn a song, you really do as best you can the job of listening more, and then playing the part just as is. It's really that important. So get yourself a chance to take some private lessons on music notation and reading, and make the parts sound the same. Don't play anything that just flows. One thing I love to do in clinics is what I call name that groove or name that fill. So we just talked about the importance of learning a drum part authentically. So I'm going to play you 3 fill examples and 3 groove examples. I want you to see if you know the answer. I'll play it twice, and then I'll give you the answer at the end. Okay? So I'm just going to play the fill because it should be able to stand on its own. I shouldn't have to explain anything. Here's fill number 1. Got it? Rock With You by Michael Jackson, played by John J.R. Robinson, one of the most recorded drummers in history. Try this one. Again. Brick House by the Commodores, classic drum fill. Okay, how about one more? This is more of an alternative rock or pop punk fill, so let's see if I can play this one. Got it? First Date by Blink-182, Travis Barker, of course. So a fill can stand on its own. If you have to start the song and that's the song, you better play the fill right, otherwise people might not know what you're doing. Now there's 3 grooves I'll play for you. So again, I'll just play the groove. Let's see if you can figure it out. Here's the first one. Got it yet? One more time. It's a spooky song, Thriller by Michael Jackson. Really important tune to know. Check this one out. More of a rock vibe and actually a different time signature to deal with. Let's see if you recognize it. Any idea? Running Away by Hoobastank. And that's a lot of information in that groove. That hi-hat pattern, keeping the ostinato going, really important. I'll play one more groove for you. I'm actually going to reference the intro so you have a little more context. But the groove I just played, the Hoobastank groove, that was in what we call 12/8. The next groove is actually in 3/4. So it's also important for you to make sure you learn how to play in odd time signatures because you're going to have to. See if you recognize this tune. Here's the intro and the groove. Any clue? That's What You Get by Paramore. So there are pop songs in 3. Don't run away from those. So that's a little idea of what I do at clinics. It's a little game, and we'll usually pass out things if you get the right answer. But learn the opening fill, learn the groove, and that way you can play a song or play a game called Name That Groove. Have a good time. call yourself a percussionist means you play the entire family, from piano to timpani, to snare drum, to marimba, to cymbals. There's a lot of instruments in this family, and if you're a drum set player and you're scared of percussion or you just think, oh, it's not for me, you're wrong, because you can learn it and get with a teacher. That way they can show you all the details, but this will be a good start for you. There are two instruments you as a drum set player should know how to play as a percussionist. We'll talk about shakers and also tambourines. You can be your own percussionist in the studio. After you lay down a drum set track, you can lay down your own percussion track, and you can play them at the same time. So don't limit yourself. Really take advantage of this family. Let's start with the shakers first. So I just have egg shakers for today. I'm going to give you two patterns, a duple pattern, which is based on twos, and a triple pattern based on threes. Basic 16th note shaker pattern. Watch my technique, and then I'll show you what we're going to do to enhance it. Here's a basic 16th note shaker pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to add an accent to that. All you have to do with your hand is just move your hand up when you want the accent, and then bring your hand back down for the non-accent. So we'll accent all the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. So here's that pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you saw my hand, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Now let's go to a triple pattern. When you play these triple patterns, you actually want to start on the back side, or your backward stroke, because if you start on the front side, your accents are going to be very uncoordinated. So let's start on the back side, unaccented first, with triplets. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now to accent beat 2 and 4, we'll have our forward motion be the actual accent. It'll feel a lot more natural. So here's how that sounds. So it's really important to know between these two styles, as far as triple or duple, how to start and how to play some accents. There's several more things you can do with time, but those are the real basics. Last little trick that you can do with just the shakers is you can make little rattlesnake effects or rain effects. So start relaxed, hold the eggs in each hand, and maybe provide a stereo effect as you play. You're going to bring the hands up slowly. It's really fun. You're trying to capture sounds, okay? And the last thing I'll show you before we move on to the next instrument will be a trick that a guitar player showed me. So don't think that a vocalist or a guitarist can't tell you how to play your instrument, because they can. I didn't think about this, but I was trying to play a song and I wasn't getting the tambourine part as I should have. And he said, hey, use the back of your hand to hit the tambourine while you're playing your shaker. Brilliant. So here's a little example of how that sounds. Pretty simple. And the tambourine's in the same height as my hand, so it's not a huge drop. So that's a really basic approach to playing shakers. There's many shapes and sizes, but make sure you learn how to play this instrument well. Keep your hand horizontal, keep the eggs straight, and get a great sound front and back. Let's move to the tambourine. Again, all shapes and sizes. We're going to start with a duple pattern first, where we start on the inside, so 16th notes. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and here's how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'll add my hand on 2 and 4 to get that clapping backbeat. Here is how that pattern sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have to just play on the inside, you can also play on the outside. So the E's and the U's will be with your fingertips on the back side of the tambourine. So here's a little improv example so you can see and hear how that would sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's go to the triplet example. If you try and start the triplet example playing inside, watch what happens when you try and play a backbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no tambourine there because it's on the outside. It's an odd number. So start on the outside, and then when you play your backbeat on 2 and 4, you'll be able to play your hand on the tambourine. Here's how that sounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so there's 2 basic patterns for tambourine. Shaker, tambourine, you must learn those 2. It's really important. You will love it. It's really important. Let's move on to the cajon since I'm sitting on it. This instrument is fantastic. First thing I want to say, do not wear any jewelry as far as wedding rings or any kind of rings you have, or long sleeve shirts even, because they're going to get in the way. So I took mine off, so Ashley, I love you, but I have to take off my rings when I play. Cajon is really important. Number 1 technique about the cajon, sit up straight. Many people think when you play cajon, you do that. You don't. You sit straight up, let your arms hang, and you're going to get the bass tone and the snare tone, or the slap tone. So really there's 3 basic strokes. Do not hit this too hard because it's just your hands versus wood, so you don't want to lose that battle. But a nice bass tone, not bladed, not fanned, just relax your hands. Just off center will be your bass tone, so right hand and left hand can play that. Then you can get a mid snare or mid slap tone where the base of the knuckles will hit the top edge just off center of the cajon. And then one more stroke is the slap, which will be about the second knuckle. Be careful with this one. There will be a little bit of pain, but not a lot. Don't overhit, but you have to get used to that sensation of wrapping your knuckles on the wood. So here is the slap tone. So when you combine those, you can create some very fun grooves. Like you heard in the very beginning, just giving you a sample of what you can do with the cajon. But really, one goal for you to play is play any drum set groove you can with kick and snare, and then duplicate that on the cajon. So you can play any pattern you want to, just make sure you understand the coordination of the hands. You can split your hands up with your right hand playing the bass, left hand playing the snare, or play alternate 16th notes. So here's an example of both, so you can hear that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Natural sticking still applies, so right hand will play numbers and ands if you're playing 16th notes, E's and U's in your left hand. So basic cajon, sit up straight. Let's learn the technique, not overplaying. And remember, don't use any jewelry or long sleeve shirts, just keep your arms and your hands free. Let's move on to the congas. So I'm going to get these set up over here and talk through some basic strokes on that. Congas, not bongos. Big difference. Congas, a lot longer, usually attached to the floor or on big stands. Playing congas is a lot of fun. I want to go through a few basic technique strokes for you and play a couple different styles and talk about the relationship to this and a drum set player. So the first thing I want to show you is just how to get a basic open tone on the conga. If you look at the drum right in front of me, which is in this case the middle conga drum, I have it tilted and held up with my feet. This is the proper technique because if it's on the floor, we want to get the tone a little bit higher so it's not dead. So the first stroke we're going to work on is an open stroke with just the relaxed hand. So here's what it sounds like. Also on the low conga. On the low conga, I have a piece of plywood on the bottom so it can get that resonance. If you're on carpet, the drum will not be speaking as clearly as if it's elevated on something. So both drums are really elevated off the ground. That's really important. When you hit these drums, your second joint or your knuckles, your bass, will actually be on the comfort curve or the bearing edge. So you're going to feel a little bit of sensation on your base of your knuckles when you play this. Next stroke, which is a very fun one to work on, is the quinto slap. So it's actually 2 strokes in one. First stroke is a muffle, off center. Second stroke is a slap, which sounds like this. So that stroke is achieved by slightly cupping your hand. Pretend like there's a ball under the head, you're trying to slightly grab it. And you're going to strike just off center. It's aggressive, so you're going to sit in your practice room and just work on getting that nice pop. But muting that left hand helps you get that pop sound in the slap. Now the different stroke that will be used to replace that when you're playing an opened slap sound is called the mini slap. Poncho Sanchez made this very popular. So there's no cheating with the muffle. You're going to play just that same cupping motion with the hand, but get the same slap. So here's how that sounds. One of my teachers I was working with at Musicians Institute would sometimes leave his index finger up. It was just a way that helped him relax, so sometimes I use it too. So it won't always be this way, it might be this way. So when you put these strokes together, you get some very nice melodic concepts. One more technique I want to show you before we move into grooves is the heel-toe motion. You want to make sure you work on this so you can play them evenly. So heel will be on the downbeats, and the toe, which is your fingers, will be on the upbeats. Here's an example of that. So this is really used as in-between notes or ghost notes. So one of the first patterns you can learn that works in, of course, Afro-Cuban music, but even in pop music, is called the 3-point shuffle. Again, made very popular by Poncho Sanchez. Here's how that sounds. Whenever you start playing a conga pattern, always introduce the open tone. Don't start with a muffle. So for example, I wouldn't do this. Start with the open tone. So the 3-point shuffle happens to be the toe, heel, toe in between the slaps. So if I was to play it and bring it out for you, here's how it looks. 1, 2, 3, 4. That right there. 3 points. This pattern works in Latin music, jazz. You can swing the same pattern. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once you play that pattern, you can really apply it to any style. And then, of course, you can get into many other like funk styles or R&B styles. Marvin Gaye's Percussionist usually played a lot of these really upbeat, funky grooves. So something like this. So those are basic strokes and a couple different patterns you can work on. But let's say you're the drummer and there's a percussionist as far as a conga player playing with you. If I'm playing these conga parts and you're playing a lot of toms, then I shouldn't be at the gig. You're taking my part, you're stepping on my toes. So as a drummer and a percussionist, you want to make sure you know how to work with the drummer. If you're playing congas and they're playing a lot of toms, you shouldn't be playing toms. Or if you're the drummer and you're playing a lot of toms, but there's a conga player playing congas, you probably shouldn't play toms. There's a little bit of respect that you get with these things. So playing with a percussionist is really important. And there's a bunch of different attitudes you want to take with it. But starting with the congas first, remember, this is not to replace the drummer, but to help enhance the drummer's groove. You want to be a complete musician, mainly a percussionist. I want to be able to give you just a few tips that people have given me over the years that have helped me become successful. And number one, it's about your success. So here are some things you can do to do that. Number one, study with a private teacher. It's really important to do that. It's great to have YouTube and all these videos out there, but you can't beat the one-on-one interaction of a private teacher. So take private lessons. You're going to really benefit from that. If you're really serious about becoming a percussionist, Go to a music school. Find a school that has a strong program or just a school that focuses on you becoming a performer. I went to Musicians Institute in Hollywood. There's several schools like that around the country. But that's really to your benefit. To study the craft is to actually study with the craft, the people that do it really well. Next thing I want to talk about is making sure that you listen to everything possible, all genres. Listen to rock, listen to pop, listen to jazz, listen to things you don't like, because you're going to end up playing them one day. It's really important. Something I actually really love to do while studying other drummers is what I call drum crushes. I'll take one drummer and study them for months to years. There's a couple of drummers I studied for 4 to 5 years at a time, and some for just 2 months. But you investigate everything they do, you listen to everything they do, you try and take what they play and make it your own. But pick a drum crush. If it's a boy, if it's a girl, that's fine. Make sure you're okay with it. Another thing I want to get you into is the importance of playing a melodic instrument. I myself am a trumpet player and trombone player. So playing trumpet and trombone have helped my ear become very well in tune with pitch and not just only rhythm. So if you play piano and drums, great. If you play marimba and drums, great. Play something melodic, even a recorder or whistling or singing. That's really important because when you start tuning drums, you'll understand the concept of pitch and you'll just become that much more of a well-rounded musician. If you're seeking an endorsement and figuring out, how do I do that? Well, let me give you a few tips on that. It's a big misconception that you think when you're endorsed, you get things for free. That's not the case. If that was the case, all the companies would be broke. Here and there's promotional things that you can try out, but really, it's about discounts. Now, you want to make sure you have a press kit, which is a biography of your music career, a resume of who you've played with, where you've played, basically a brag sheet, any CDs you've played on, and pictures of yourself. And as an endorsee, you're basically a traveling advertisement. You're playing these drums or these percussion instruments at different locations and people see them and it gets in their mind. So go to where the companies are. Don't just try and send an email because everyone does that. Go to an event where they are and meet the people that are actually representing the company, and that'll help you at least get your foot in the door. Another thing is making sure you purchase gear. Gear is expensive, which is why endorsements are nice, but try and get great gear as often as possible. You can't get everything at once, but if you buy one cymbal at a time and one stand at a time and one snare drum, you'll eventually have that dream kit that you wanted. But it does take time. Get the right tools for the job. If you're playing really hard, maybe heavy metal, get metal or rock cymbals. Don't play thin crashes on a heavy metal gig, and vice versa. If you're playing jazz, you don't want hard, heavy metal cymbals. So make sure you pick the right gear for your job. And the last thing I want to make sure you go away with is you can be successful in this. Practice time is really important. Thinking about it is one thing. Air drumming is another thing. But sitting down and using seat power is going to help you get to these goals. So hopefully in this DVD you'll be able to get a chance to see how that really lives out. Good luck and keep it going.